All right, I'll call the Willington Board of Education Policy Committee to order. It is 7 p.m. on April 11th, 2022. We have a shorter agenda. I think some of these things are going to be quick. The first thing is the policy review for dress code. And there was one change. I'm just going to share my screen. It'll be so much easier for us, I think. So we just went through this. Brenda and I go through policies after the final kind of edits. We threw in anything in red here. Can you see my screen okay?
Yeah, but it's practically invisible. So
yeah.
So small I can't read the type. But I have a copy in front of me.
Okay. So we just anything in red. So the of we crossed out of or actual there. Put an and in there. And then I worked with Mary Kay afterwards, and we rewrote this. And I think the ensure this whole 7, what they had put in, is now written as ensure the safety and security of students and staff. Individuals should be identifiable, including through the utilization of school security video equipment. So their point of this in case of emergencies was really about hoods. And they do say, you know, as long as it says you have to be identifiable, it takes care of that. And it also, I believe there's a section that says hoods are not permitted, I think, in some point.
I think also the baseball caps being worn backwards. It kind of applies to that too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes,
so you can
correct.
see their faces.
Yeah. And they may be allowing kids to wear baseball hats forward as long as they're not pulled way down. So I think that's kind of at the discretion of, I think they tried to write it that way, but I think they'll probably do the backwards thing for a while. So again, you can just see there's the does in there. There's a couple things. But overall, and this policy was reviewed by the attorney as well. And she was good with it. So anything you want edited in here, any changes you want, or are you set for this to go to the board?
One thing that I've been thinking about since our last meeting, and I know this is a very positive approach to everything, and they're trying not to say what you can't do. Yep. The length of things, dresses, shorts, is that like on a case by case? I didn't really see it referred to anywhere. I think it was, remember it used to be that you held your hands by your side and that was how long everything had to be. But
I didn't see that anywhere.
No, it's not in this one, but I think it might have been in the previous one, but
I think that's getting dropped for a few reasons. One, kids have different length arms, different length legs, so it's kind of not fair sometimes.
Yeah.
It also sort of puts limits on things depending on your socioeconomic status. If you have to wear your sister's hand-me-down shorts, you can't help it if they're extremely short.
Okay, that's a good point.
It said something about distraction.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of like up for debate, really. I mean, I hear what you're saying.
And I know they're really taking a very positive approach, which I think is excellent. You know, I'm just thinking about conversations with my 5th grader as she walks out the door. You know.
Yeah.
I will, that's a good question, Ann. I don't know the answer to that. I will say that I think what I can do is ask MK. And I think Brianna's right. I think that was part of the reason they left it off. But I'm curious to know if I don't see anything on here. So I'm assuming they had some conversation about it, but I'm curious to know if there's any reasonable solution without singling a specific gender out, or if there's a way to say it.
Okay, they refer to tops, they refer to appropriate tops. But anyway, just it as a grandparent slash guardian, it gives me some teeth in my discussion if, something inappropriate is potentially going out the door and I can say, no, that will not be allowed, or I don't
Yeah.
know.
And I don't know if their purpose is that one that's on the students may wear. This, I'm not positive.
Okay,
I'm not sure if this is what it was about. Because
Okay.
I know they had a long conversation about tops. And so covering torso that meets the top of the belt line and covers undergarments. So
Mhm.
yes, that could be a couple things, but let me ask, it's a good question.
Okay, sure.
And, I can always shoot you an answer on that. If it's going to take some conversation, we can just hold it off until our next meeting, but it's a really good question.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else?
Yeah, the only other thing I was wondering is, should there be a clause or something about accommodations for 504s or IEPs, because wearing a hood might be included for some students?
No,
That's
that would always trump policy. That would always
It
trump
does
policy.
anyway? Okay,
It does. If it's written into a 504 IEP, it becomes legal, and that becomes has more weight than this.
okay, good.
On the second page, Phil.
Yep.
On the 6th or 7th, line down, we have a laundry list of brimless hats, beanies, berets, and et cetera. Can we delete et cetera? I don't, in our policies, I don't like that. I mean, there's a few examples there. It would seem to me that would be enough without.
What if we do this, Herb? What if we do strike through that? Put that in red. And what if we put examples in the front?
Examples include,
Right. So that way it's not only brimless hats, beanies, and berets. It could be other things.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's good.
Okay.
examples include but are not limited to.
Okay, and number 4 on the front page. Allow students to wear clothing of their choice that is comfortable and that expresses their identity and or religious beliefs. What are we referring to there in their identity? What can you tell me what they had in mind in that regard?
Well, I mean, I think it gets to, who they are as a person. So if you have an athlete and they want to wear their athletic gear, they can wear it. If you have somebody who's a rock star and has a sparkly jacket, they can wear their sparkly jacket as long as it's comfortable. And I think that's the point of it. They're expressing kind of who they are as a person. Does that make sense, Herb?
Yeah, it sure does.
Mhm.
And I would say that's pretty important especially for middle school students. They like to express their identity for certain. Anything else? Any other comments or changes? I'm now going to make this an 11. Okay, let me bring this policy then back to MK, and I will ask her thoughts on that one. Just about the length of shorts, skirts, pants, whatever it may be, and see what their discussion was. I don't know that answer.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. All right, moving on. We good? All right, let's move on. The next one is 5144.1, it's physical restraint, seclusion of students, and use of exclusionary timeouts. The attorney did not have any updated recommendations or changes. So everything in here, I mean, you know, this is significantly a legal policy. It's a good thing to have updated and in place. And the idea here is that, sorry for making you dizzy. The idea here is that you've had a few years here and you'll be able to have an updated policy that just says reviewed. So is there anything that you want questions in this, or anything specifically you would want to change?
Do the staff have an opportunity to have a personnel day for this particular policy?
Yes, so we have, we built it and we have a grid of the people that have to be trained in order to implement this policy. And so we actually have an internal person. It's our school social worker. She is trained in a specific procedure. It's a it's a certain brand of, there's a few companies out there that do this work. She's been trained, so she's our trainer. And these people have to either be recertified every so often, or if they're brand new, they need the full training. And that's what we adhere to. And so they have professional time related to just that. And they actually, I believe it was their last full PD day here, they went through the process. They get recertified basically if they're new, or if they're already trained.
Now, if we have a student that acts up and falls under this policy, we have procedures apparently for excluding them, and they have timeouts and things of that kind. And I assume that they're monitored during this time, but do we have a room where they're sent, or facilities? This policy lays out all kinds of facilities that are required for the student who would be excluded, hopefully just temporarily until they calm down or whatever.
Correct.
Do
So
we have police in our building for that?
So think about this from a de-escalation standpoint. An exclusionary timeout might be a space in the classroom. It doesn't have to be, but it could be. And again, it's not locked. It's for the purpose of de-escalating or calming that student down. Each student is different. There are spaces outside the classroom in both schools that students can go to. It could be a pull-out instruction room, a special education teacher's room. For some students, depending on what it is, it could be the hallway, because it just could be removable from peers. That is what is needed. It depends on their individual plan. In the most extreme cases, it is an empty space where they can just go and they're monitored absolutely. And they're with an adult. And it's the people that are trained in this are using de-escalation strategies. So that's the whole purpose of this, is to have them out for a very brief amount of time and then have them return to where they were as soon as possible. Well, of course, keeping everyone safe.
And the parents of the child are notified, I assume.
Always correct.
Now, another part of this contract here, this policy mentioned the fire alarm system. In other words, if a student is in a room somewhere and it's a locked door, that the fire alarm system is supposed to be attached to that, it opens automatically. Do we have that, or is that something just in the policy?
There's no locked doors like that. So basically what and this is per fire code, like you would see an external latch. We don't put any external latches on doors. That would not allow the person in the room to get out. We do not do that. So if there's a fire alarm and we need to go out, the person on the inside of that room could absolutely leave at any time. It's not like it's a locked door or latched from the outside. If it's not a fire alarm, we would be keeping that student in that room if they needed to be there, just for their own safety or the safety of others. But during a fire alarm, or whether it's a drill or not, they would be moved outside.
Okay, and just one other quick
Mhm.
question. In
Sure.
regard to the intervention team, I assume they're well qualified to do this. Do you select that team, or does the principal select that crisis intervention team?
So I do not select that team. The team is, I will say, recruited. It's not a requirement, but typically a crisis team is, they are well trained. They have their training, and it's usually a mix of folks. Typically, a principal's on that crisis team. A school social worker, school counselor could be on that team. Special education teachers could be on that team. Sometimes, on occasion, it could be a paraprofessional. You could also consider a school nurse as part of the team, although they are not there necessarily moving a student, or they wouldn't be restraining a student. They're there to monitor. Typically, there's not a classroom teacher because they're going to be responsible for other students. But we do have folks on the Unified Arts team. Sometimes it's a PE teacher that would be a member of that crisis team. So if there were ever in a situation, that crisis team would come together and they would work collaboratively as they are trained to de-escalate the situation. That's their job.
We have two teams, one in center and one in all.
That is correct.
I had another question, but it slipped my mind. If I remember what it was, I'll
Yeah.
come back. Thanks, Phil.
You're welcome. I will say, sorry, Ann and Brianna, before you chime in, this is one of those things that we use as minimally as possible, but you have to have a policy in case you do need to use it. And so when a parent goes into a planning and placement team for, in special education, they get this information. They know that they're very aware of this. And that's why communication is so important. This is important information that we report out to the state. So this policy protects the student, it protects the families, it protects the district, and it really protects the teachers and staff that are implementing this policy. So it's got a lot of purposes. Brianna or Ann, any comments about this policy?
Yeah, well, I have some thoughts and questions, but I don't know if they really belong here. They're just kind of related around, like elopement. So do we need to have policy about what we do specifically for that, or just kind of assume it falls under all this same? I mean, it does.
I mean, elopement could be, it doesn't necessarily have to fall under physical restraint and seclusion, it depends on how it happens, right? It might not. And so the idea, it just depends on how it happens. So I would say probably a lot of the time, if we're moving a student back in, as soon as you're quote unquote hands-on, if you're escorting that student back into the building, it's going to fall into this because it qualifies the same way.
Okay, yeah. So then when a student exits a group of peers, whether in a classroom or otherwise,
Yep.
do you have it so that they go from point A to point B to point C back to B then A, or they leave, they de-escalate a little, they have the conversation and come right back to the room?
Depends 100% on the student's plan. Some are, have multiple checkpoints to re-enter, right? So if there's a, significant issue and there's, some sort of seclusion, typically there's an ABA, right? A behaviorist involved in this that has helped create a plan for the student. and they might have checkpoints. So checkpoint 1 might be out of out of the seclusionary, room to a special education placement. So they've got to complete 2 tasks with their special education teacher. Then the next checkpoint could be the back of the room to work with a paraprofessional. So they're returning back to maybe the person they're working with. And typically students in this situation have their own one-to-one paraprofessional. But those are the checkpoints to get back in. Sometimes, and again, this is about knowing the student and knowing their plan and how quickly they can respond or not respond. Some students move in quicker than others. Sometimes wherever the seclusion is, they actually can do their recovery and de-escalation right there. And that is part of their plan. And then they can move directly back to the classroom. Obviously, if things escalate again, plans change, but that's all about the use of the plan. And that's why we pay BCBA's good money to help develop the plans.
Yeah, I think that repair of the relationship is really important. And, if a student has to exit a room and then they talk for 5 minutes and then the kid comes back to the classroom door and is left there, that doesn't seem like it's going to be very successful for anyone. So that kind of drives me crazy. It's not
Right.
best for the student. They need to clear what happened a little bit, by having those restorative conversations and then move forward. But like you said, as able, I get that part.
Thoughtful transition.
Yeah. The other thing I wanted to just ask about is, do we need to say anything about when, not when a student is removed, but when the other students have to evacuate?
No, because it's still considered to be, that can still be a use of exclusionary timeout. It's just that we move other students. Typically, if that happens, we're still notifying parents.
Of the rest of the group, or that?
Yes, correct.
Really?
Yes.
Thank you.
We notify parents, especially because who do you want to hear it from? Right? Do you want to hear it from your child, or
Right.
unfortunately, we had to remove the children from the classroom today. There was an incident to keep everybody safe, and here's what we did in place. Because again, you want to use this and you want to have your minimized anytime you have to move a student. Anytime you have to put your hands on a student is not a good thing. And so, if we can do that in classroom, sometimes it's easier to move kids and keep kids safe that are not directly involved.
Yeah.
Nobody likes to do that on a regular basis.
No.
So typically, again, a plan escalates when I say that. The BCBAs are involved and we're rewriting a plan, and then that individual student plan is more specific, and maybe they're working out more, or we're looking at triggers or what it is. So we're not constantly pulling students out of the classroom.
Right. Okay. I'm glad to hear that the families would be notified that there was an interruption to their students' day, because that can be really not traumatic, probably is a little bit of a over the top word to use, but it can be pretty stressful when that has
Sure.
to happen.
Yeah.
And like you were saying, the privacy of the student having the difficulty needs to be maintained as much as possible too. So that's another reason those kids leave sometimes.
Right.
Okay, that sounds really good. Thank you.
And anything?
No, looks good.
Okay, so then if you're good with this policy, Herb, did you have another question? Sorry.
No, I'm good.
Okay. If you're good with this policy, then because there's no changes to it, all I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go make you dizzy again. Sorry. I'm gonna go back down. Policy reviewed. April 11th, 2022. Look at that. It was
The
exactly
same day.
Look at that. Wow. It's unbelievable.
Now, Phil, does this need to go to the full board or just
No,
us?
from
Okay.
what I understand, it only goes for the full board if you want to make it any changes, which if you don't, you can just say it was reviewed on this date, and then we move on. If there were changes, we would send it for approval.
Okay,
Okay,
thank you.
you're welcome. Okay, next one. All right, here's my the madness of let me just go back to the agenda, make sure I'm on the right one. Sexual discrimination, sexual harassment. This is the madness of the start of COVID. So this is another policy that we approved in June of 2019. And for whatever reason, it was never posted. So this was actually the one that was approved already. It has all of your changes in it. It's exactly what we talked about last time, except this paragraph right here. So there's a minor change right here, and I'll show you on the next page. So this section right here, where it had all the examples, we had a long conversation. We actually talked to the attorney about it, saying, why are we listing anything at all? Because it already says conduct of a sexual nature. So that, as soon as you start listing things, you get kind of stuck with this is it. And so that came out. And so the new policy, when it was approved, just said this. It took out that bullet or that item number 4, and it added using electronic communications to this one. So sorry for that change if it's unclear. So again, this number 4 that you have right here, all this red was already in there. Okay, all those changes were made, and on number 4, that was all eliminated because the attorney said you already have it. It's in there. It's conduct of a sexual nature. That's all you need. Everything else can fall underneath that for all those examples. And then number 5, where we said computers, the attorney had just said using electronic communication. So this was, again, already updated. So the only word Brenda and I caught today was to add this word in. Sexual harassment is any conduct that, one, is in sexual nature, in asexual nature maybe, or you can just leave it as is sexual in nature. It's up to you. That would just be a minor change for the board, but it's up to you.
Maybe of.
Of a. I'm fine. That's up to you. Ann or Herb, are you okay if that's the change there?
That's a number 4.
So if you look at below the definitions, the paragraph starts, it says sexual harassment is any conduct that, one, is of a sexual nature. It said is sexual nature.
Yeah.
And when we caught that, we just changed it to something we thought needed to say something else. So Brianna just said it is of a sexual nature, and I'm fine with that.
That's okay.
I have a
Yeah.
question about number 4. So
Yep.
we've striked the first sentence, right?
Hold on,
Are
let me go to this. Yep, go ahead.
Are we maintaining the touching from
No.
that portion? No, is that entire?
Yeah, look at my
statement is
screen right
all
now. So
gone.
basically, this is number 3.
Okay,
This became number 4. And so what the attorney said was it really should look like this now.
so we are keeping the second half?
No,
No, just 3 will cover all of that.
correct. You got
And
it.
4 will be completely deleted. Okay, that's better. Thank you for striking it.
Yeah.
All right. Understood. Thank you.
This was the madness of COVID. And Brendan and I looked at it like, we already did this policy. What happened?
Mhm.
But it's not a bad thing to review this.
Yeah.
These are ones that, because they're so legal and you want to make sure they're up to date, it's good to review them. So we would send this to the board literally with only this change right here. Sexual harassment is any conduct that, one, is of a sexual nature.
Did the board approve this already, or did the
They didn't.
policy committee just?
No, in June of 2019, that's when it was approved.
Okay,
But this was not. This was the only change. And this, I sent this back to the attorney again, just for clarification, and said, "Do you have anything else?" And she said, "No, looks good." Brianna, there was, I'm sorry, the other thing, I think it was this one, right? Where you asked about students? Was it this one? With gender? It was.
Yeah.
This is the one you asked about gender. And it does not need to be in this one because it can be included under sexual harassment or discrimination. However, I did look to see what other districts are doing. Most don't have it, they don't identify anything specific because they want to be more broad to catch more. However, Summers did their own. And so this is an example of it. So the policy we're looking at right now on the left side of the screen is 5145. And what they did is they did a couple different layers, and they did transgender and gender nonconforming youth as one of the separations. And so they identified things. And again, this is all legal. But gets into restrooms and locker rooms. If you wanted to consider this as a separate thing, you could. The other option is this. We have to adjust our administrative regs, and I could actually put those types of things that were in the Summers policy into the administrative regs. And that's one of the things that the attorney said, you know, it allows you the flexibility to change things as you need to without having to come back and rewrite a policy. So I'm glad to do that, but I want to make sure you you tell me how you want it to be. Do you want administrative regs or do you want a policy?
I think it's really important that some of those, somehow we allude to the fact that we're aware, considering it, caring for, respecting, etc., of those folks. Is it possible to add to the blue highlighted right here and just somehow put some of those words in here? Like including, I don't know. I don't know. I'm just thinking, like, when somebody looks through policy and they see that we have included a diverse group of people, then it says really something about our community and how we care for our kids.
Yeah, I mean, and this is their whole, look at all these sections. So they have a civil, and notice they subscribe to the CABE policy system. So you can buy this, and basically they recommend their changes, and Summers has accepted them. What I'll tell you is Summers has a lot of policies because of it. They just take a lot of them. So they have the civil and legal rights responsibilities. It goes into what the regulations are. I mean, they have a whole bunch of sections in here that are all tied to this. So it's just a matter of, I mean, they have the sexual abuse prevention education program, a separate harassment, separate transgender, gender nonconforming, and then the policy that's the procedure, and then the administrative reg underneath it. So I'm glad to put it where you want it.
I'm just thinking, like, what, I don't know, how to show that these things are on the radar, but you don't have to be super specific about that.
Is that what the definition is?
Well, okay, it gets really tricky, right? Because you have like physical assignment, you have identified gender. Those are two different things.
Yep.
And a lot of people differentiate the two very specifically. So I don't know, what does that say?
I think it's going to go into, it'll hit the bullying
gonna
policy. Pass with this.
Gray and fuzzy, I know. I just was thinking if there was some way that we can use those words. What did it say on the Summers policy specifically? I had like transgender and something else. And gender nonconforming youth. If those words were anywhere, then that tells our families that it's something we also are working towards.
What if I put that in the regulation now? That's because the regulation is definitely is part of the policy. It's posted with it.
Right. Yeah. Is there any way to put those words on that blue highlighted piece just so it is somewhere included in the policy itself? And maybe I'm being like way too overboard here. I just know that like when families consider moving to a town, they might look through a policy, and if they see those words and acceptance and respect seem to be part of our policies, then that might give them a certain feel about our community.
So maybe this is what you're looking at right here. Free from discrimination based on sex, sexual orientation, or gender identity or expression.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah,
All right.
that kind of covers. Maybe you can just put those words in that blue part where it says that the superintendent is going to work on the regs. Like,
I think it might be good to place that sentence, which identifies the different categories in the policy, but then spell it out in the regs.
What about that right there? So it
Is
says
this-
superintendent of schools shall develop administrative regulations implementing this policy to maintain an environment free from discrimination based on sex, sexual orientation, or gender identity or expression.
Perfect.
Is that what you're getting at?
yeah, I
Yeah.
want to ask Jen if that covers everything.
The only thing is, Phil, right now you shall develop, but hopefully within, a period of time it will be developed. So do you want to use the shall develop, or will provide, will the superintendent of schools will have, or I don't know. There will
Shall
be-
means I have to. Shall means I have to, Ann.
Right, but at some point it will be done, but then that's still shall.
It is still shall because it's
Okay.
always, as long as it's done, and it just makes sure that we update them.
Keep
It's
it
still-
revised.
It maintains it as shall.
Okay, thank you.
So that line, does that cover what you're looking for? And Herb, are you with them on that one?
No, I like the policy the way it is,
With or without that?
without.
Okay, so that's up for you guys to discuss. I mean, if this is implied, right? If this is implied through the other pieces here. So see,
I have a question. What is state policy related to this? Is it mentioned anywhere in state policy?
I put
Whoa, we
I
have
put it on
the
your stand. I
gang
put it
in
on the
here.
stand.
Guys, can you
He
please?
stole my phone.
excuse
It's on the
me.
stand, guys.
Mute,
No, it's
excuse
not.
me.
Yes, it is.
Where's,
I got you. I mean, these are the things that are listed in the legal portion of the policy. Ann or Brianna?
I'm consulting my LGBTQ plus expert right now. Make sure we have proper language.
I mean, I could also take this and see what they have. And again, I don't know what the administrative reg looks like for EO Smith. I could look at that. The thing
Can
that's,
we, go
go
ahead.
ahead, Phil.
I was just gonna say down here in the definition occurs when a person, because of her sex, comma, gender identity or expression, comma, or sexual orientation is denied participation in, or can those words just get added to the definition?
Honestly, what I don't know, Brianna, is because the title of the policy is sexual discrimination, sexual harassment. I would say that, is this making you identify one way or the other? And is that why Summers has a separate harassment policy? I don't know that answer. We could.
So the question I was trying to ask before, does the state have a policy related to this? And number two, does CABE?
Well, this is CABE's policy right here.
That is CABE's, okay. Is
Well,
that
this is
based
CABE.
on state?
This is CABE's, well, the state doesn't have a policy on, it's legal. So anything that they put in here is all referenced for the different cases, right? So basically, I'm just looking to see if they do anything gender-based here. See, they take out the sexual portion of this policy, and they make this for the harassment only. And this is Summers, and this is a harassment policy. So for the purposes of this policy, harassment consists of verbal, written, graphic, or physical conduct relating to an individual's race, color, religion, sex, and they list all of these things, including gender identity, expression, or age when such conduct harassment, and then it goes into the other things and what it meets. So that's where it's in this policy. They separate it out. I don't think, let's just see if it's in this one. They don't have it in their sexual harassment policy.
Okay. I really think it won't be long before all of that stuff is going to be necessary anyway, like it's coming down the pike probably.
Yep.
Don't you think? So
Yeah,
I'm fine with,
go ahead.
I'm fine with it being that you're going to work on it in the regs. I just don't know if it is helpful or harmful or neither to put some more of those words somewhere in here. Is that the specific reason why you
What's
would be
that?
doing it? Is there administration regulations regarding maintaining an environment free from discrimination?
Are you saying
don't know.
take this off?
If it's bothering people, then
I'm not sure what part you're addressing.
trying to think if there's a different way to put it in there.
Also, part of it is the harassment. It's one thing to discriminate, that can be very quiet, but it's the harassment that is, you could say, if in that you could say from discrimination and harassment based on.
But isn't that going to go to the bullying policy?
Yeah.
Is that maybe where it belongs?
I mean, bullying, and that's why they write this in here, is that on that last line, is that it may also constitute bullying. And it doesn't have to be sexual discrimination or sexual harassment.
Herb, would you feel better if it was in bullying? Or
Yeah, I'd have to think about that.
Let me do this. My suggestion is leave this for the regs, the way I have it written right now, just knowing that something would be in the regs. But I want to find out, because I didn't ask the attorney specifically, I would like to show her the examples of what's in Summers here and ask if there's a particular reason why they did, because they did title this sexual harassment. They did not mention anything about gender in there. but then they made their own section that was harassment, and they did put it in there.
That was
And
separate, was it?
It's separate. And what's interesting is this harassment policy, in my mind, should be directly linked to bullying.
Mhm.
So I just, and then they decided to do this separate one. And I know that this is the reason why they did it. Because they added in this section here.
Yeah, so can that go in? We had a part where it said some of that.
Well, but I can do that in the reg. I want to find out if the attorney thinks that we should pull this out. You know what I'm saying?
No, what do you mean by,
If you
No.
should make your own, either make your own policy or make your, so for example, some policies are literally like a page long, but the regulations are 10 pages long. And it spells out how you implement the policy. Okay, so how you implement the policy could get into all of these different things. Think about the bullying policy is written the same way. And so that's where you can go back to this and give all the definitions and explain all these things. And here's the guidance, right? I mean, they did it as, and this is not an administrative reg, but it surely looks like one of how you're doing it, how you're implementing it. And honestly, this is all legal.
I think it's gonna be required.
Right, whether you state it or not, you still have to do it.
Well, yeah.
But this is the only section here. Let me talk to her and let me get back to you on this one. How, is that okay?
Yeah. I think maybe, Brianna, to address your thing, I think possibly there needs to be some cases and some legislation, and
Yeah, I
and
don't
then
think
what you're predicting will happen, And
right.
that's why we see all of the references at the back of all the other policies, or those are all the cases and the
Correct.
legalities.
Right.
I mean, they just give a blanket general statutes here, but
Yeah.
I mean, it definitely falls under civil rights and Title IX. So
Yeah, I guess, so my question stands at, does that help her or does it matter if those words are somewhere in our policy as it is? Because if a parent, okay, I'm just gonna be done now.
Herb,
If
do
a
you
parent's
have-
looking for it, and they see that there's more to this, that's where they would find these things, then that says something. If it looks like we're just ignoring it and we're trying to make it so we don't say, boys don't cry and girls have to sit politely and don't get to cheer. Like, we're way past that. It's not just so simple anymore. It's a lot more complicated and individualized.
I'm
Herb,
gonna
do you have
suggest
any
table.
final thoughts, Herb?
No, not at this time.
You want to see what Phil finds out and then take another look?
Yeah, we could probably do that. It might be the way to go.
Okay.
So we'll table this one yet again.
Sorry.
It's okay.
all right.
No,
You wanna
no.
get it
you
right.
want- Yeah.
Sorry, just making myself a note. Okay, next policy. See, I pulled the Summers policy intentionally to show you, just give you an example of it. All right, the next policy is the minutes and vote recording. And I pulled these together because I honestly, I have a hard time. These are two separate policies, the minutes and vote recording and public participation in board meetings. but I think they go hand in hand in the questions that have come up. So I put them both on there. One's 9325 and one's 9326. I attached the letter from the attorney when she weighed in on this. I think this was Chris that wrote this, and where she said this is that the FOI commission said any communications with one or more board members or the whole board are not part of the minutes of the meeting. And that FOI does not even require public agencies to allow public comment at meetings, and these such comments do not constitute proceedings of the agency. And this basically means, even though you have a present to speak and it's a big Willington thing, I know attorneys hate this portion, is the way they see this is that you are meeting in public, but you are not a public meeting, meaning they are not part of your deliberation. So you're basically meeting in front of them, but they're not part of the conversation unless you build that in. So I think, and I want to make sure, I'm going to be quiet in a minute, but I think the questions that were asked, number one, were what should be in minutes, and what should be in minutes are basically statutorily, they want minimal information. They want to know what the vote was, who was there, how they voted. You have to produce all those things, and your policy meets that. It's that last line, and it should always reflect board action rather than containing the entire discussion of the board action. Our minutes are really long. They don't need to be that long by any means whatsoever. I don't know if that's a new thing in Willington or if it's just what we like to do or what people look for. And maybe you consider changing that now and going backwards a little bit because everything is on video, right? I would propose that you don't see that video piece on here yet. And what mainly I didn't do it because I want to see what's going to happen. I haven't, and did you see anything with legislation, or Herb or Brianna? Did they approve the extended meetings yet?
I haven't heard anything.
The virtual option. I know they were working on something that would allow it, but I haven't seen anything pass yet. So you need to determine number one, what you want in minutes. And Herb, I think it was you that said it's hard to determine because there are definitely some things, some communications you're not going to want in minutes, and maybe others you do. But if you do one, do you have to do all? So that's the only thing that I pulled on this policy that I saw was a huge red flag, and I don't know why it's been there, is under present to speak. And then I'll be quiet. It says, depending upon the topic to be discussed and information to be divulged, the board may have citizens who wish to speak in public, address the board in executive session, or refer them to the superintendent. Legally, you can't do that. They would have to meet one of the criteria to go into executive session. So I'm going to say you got to change that. Other than that, I don't have any suggestions here. This is your conversation about how you would like to adjust what you want in minutes and the public participation piece. So I'll be quiet. Thoughts?
If we were going to change that present to speak, we would delete the address the board in executive session, refer them to the superintendent, keep that or delete that?
I would leave that.
Okay.
Yeah, so, if you were chair and someone was saying something and you said, I understand you have a concern, your time is up. I'm going to refer you to the superintendent. And at one point it also says to the person who's, kind of in line, it might be the principal or it might be someone else.
Mm-hmm. Do we change that, Phil, or is that not another committee that does bylaws?
No, this is a policy.
Okay,
This falls under policy.
okay.
This
So
is
do you want to start with which one do you want to start with? Maybe that's easier first.
I'm sorry, Phil, I couldn't hear you.
Do you want to start with the minutes and vote recording first? I mean, we can go back and forth between the two. I guess,
Well,
go ahead.
well, I think the minutes of our meeting is fairly limited. You have to have the time, the place, the who attended, and things of that kind. You need the agenda listing, so that any minutes are, as you mentioned, are really minimal. Our minutes are really quite
Long.
expensive and not necessary. You need a record of the voting of each one of the board members. But you do have to have a general description of the items on the agenda that are discussed. But it doesn't have to be a 2-page document, just the
Correct.
meat of the discussion, really.
Yeah, the statute identifies exactly what needs to be in your minutes.
There's nothing in FOI that says that the minutes have to be verbatim or anything like that.
No,
It's like, as secretary of the board, if I were doing the minutes, I put down the time, who attended, and if there are any motions, include those, and which way each one of the board members
vote.
voted. But I probably wouldn't go into what we're doing now. Over the years, we've done it both ways. We've had minimal and we've had, extensive board members who are speaking, and everything they say is in there. And sometimes it's, I don't know who writes the board minutes, but you can twist them around anyway and leave things in or leave them out if you want, and so
Yeah,
I don't know.
it's the person that does the recording that, so if they have, and we do final edits, but I mean, the less you have in there, when you just get down to, here was the motion and here's how folks voted, with minimal, it takes out the bias, right? I mean, no matter who the majority is politically, no matter what the issue is, it takes out the bias when you just say, here was the motion and you're recording how the person voted.
It is so difficult to determine what is important to include about what, based on what people said, or to like paraphrase a whole entire conversation. That I can say from experience recording the SBC. Yeah, it was, it's really hard because you don't want to leave out something someone said that was really important or a turning point in the conversation, but also like, how do you sum it down? So I think that because they're recorded now, you really don't need all of the things, but trying to decide sometimes how to put in a blurb about what was discussed and how that's hard to do. And it's like subjective kind of.
What you have to do though, Brianna, in other words, you have the minutes of the meeting can be minimal, and the attorney is probably right in Robert's rules also indicates that you just put down the a few items to cover the meeting itself. However, all records are public, or public agencies, really, school boards have to be made available to the public for inspection purposes, so that all of the policies, all of the documents, all of the emails that we get from the public, for example, all of these have to, I would assume, would have to go into the superintendent's office, and that we have a record of each one of those. they're
That's
in the
right.
file somewhere, but that stuff does not have to be in the minutes that we're printing. The only thing in the minutes is if we have a motion to approve something, really.
That's right.
How everyone voted.
I think that would be great.
This
It would
is
make life a whole lot easier for our board recording secretary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
this is Summers. This is the Summers one, and a lot of them do this. I don't like theirs as much, but this is what it says. This is, vital statistics, the time, place, and date, the attendance, disposition of all matters on which action was recommended, motions and resolutions, the decisions. I mean, and this is straight from statute. So that's what you're required. And
Yeah.
Herb, I think what you just said is a really, really important piece, is
Yeah.
that any communication is available in my office. So if someone wants access to it, just like curriculum, if they wanted to come in and see the whole curriculum, they could come to my office and we would, we have a copy for viewing. If they wanted a copy of communication, FOI law allows that, as long as it's not under, attorney-client privilege or something like that. But they could pay for a copy and we could give it to them.
Yeah. Well,
So
go
ahead, sorry.
any information that we have that, related to what happened at the meeting and what was conducted at the meeting, that's all, anything that's prepared or anything that's received, any letters that we have, printed tapes, the recording that we have,
Yep.
photographs, anything related to our meetings should be saved. I don't know how long, but it should be saved for an extended period of time. When I brought this up at the meeting, that's what I had in mind, really. There is a separation, I can understand that, but our board minutes extend beyond just the minimal requirement.
Mhm.
Right.
And but we still have to retain all of the documents that
Right.
were received or used during our discussion, which include emails by board
For
members.
present. Or even emails from the public,
Yeah.
Right.
right?
Right. And I think that the present to speak piece is easy to do if someone says something. That does become, you can put that into your minutes some to a degree, right? But if they want to share something because it's not in your meeting and there was discussion about who's going to validate the data or something like that, and we were talking about data. If someone sent an email to the board and presented that data, it's available in my office through FOI. Anybody can come in and get it, but you would not put it as part of your minutes because it was not something that you created or I created as part of a formal process, which is your formal board meeting. Does that make sense?
But you might put in received a communication from a named the citizen. So that we have a-
Absolutely.
so
Yep,
there's-
absolutely, Herb. I agree 100% with that. And that's, I think Ralph is on this call, but he was one that was saying, put the name in and just the general, you could just, and this is something you could put into your minutes if you wanted to say, look, at any communications will be in the superintendent's office. They will be noted on an agenda as long as they meet the timeline, or they'd be in the next meeting. And it would just say, communication received by sent by Kristen Stevens requesting school-based health center. And if, really short, supporting the budget. And then it would let somebody know that if they wanted more information, they can go to my office. I don't know if you need that, but that was one of the ideas that was thrown out there.
And Phil, I think the rationale for that is in the letter from the attorney, where it says that FOIA does not even require public agencies to allow public comment at meetings, and any such comments do not constitute proceedings of the agency.
That's correct. And that's why you don't have to, if it becomes part of your minutes, you're almost saying we verified this information. That's not the case of what you're doing. Someone is just sharing their opinion or their information that they have. If it's a communication to the board, it's accessible to the public in my office.
We don't have to have public speak on our agenda.
You're right.
No.
As a courtesy, and just so we get information from them, but on a special meeting, for example, you might not have that on there, and certainly in an executive session, you would have it.
Right. Herb, can you tell me how you guys do it at EO? You guys have, is the present to speak, like people can ask questions up front and it's not live? Do you know how they do it?
It's, we have a spot at the beginning of the meeting, and I think
Okay.
that's the only time that the public can speak. And they can speak on any topic.
Yeah.
Whereas basically, someone that's using present to speak should speak to an agenda item primarily.
Yeah. Yep, that's correct.
Do you respond to them, Herb, or is it the same way that we do it, where there's no response from the board?
Pretty much the same way we do it, just listening. You don't
Okay.
want to get into a discussion with them at that time.
So let me make a suggestion then, based upon what I'm hearing. And this is kind of a first look at this. I'm going to make a suggestion for the minutes and vote recording policy that you allow me to take that back and adjust this with some changes that are more bulleted, like a bulleted list of what's expected to be in minutes. And I'll write some statements that basically to say that this is not going to be our minutes are not going to be a 25-page verbatim document. I think everybody would appreciate that. That's point number one. So I would change this into bullets matching statutory language. Are you okay with that?
Mhm.
Sounds good so far.
Okay. So that would be that. And then I think this, the secondary part of this is the communications policy, or sorry, the public participation portion. I can add a blurb into the communication section to say anything that is emailed, meaning charts, graphs, would be accessible to the public via the superintendent's office, but not be part of the minutes. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
You could acknowledge that the board had received this communication, the name and the address of the person who sent it,
Mhm.
and maybe a general, a phrase of what it's about.
Yep. In agenda and minutes. Correct?
Would it be in the agenda? I think
If
it would.
I get it in time, yes. So if you get it in time, and there's a timeline in here, if they give it, presented in the hands of the board chair of the day prior to the meeting. So there's a timeline in here.
So that would go under communications, right? Not under present to speak, but communications.
Correct.
Now, Phil, under this policy on the that we adopted previously, under comments, we have citizen will be allowed to speak only to the announced topic and may do so during present to speak portion. Does that mean that they can only speak to an agenda item? It would seem to me that if a citizen wants to come in and talk on any legitimate topic, they should be able to do that.
I agree.
This limits them to just whatever is on the agenda. We're not
That's
going
up to you.
anyway, and if it's something important from their point of view, do we want them to do that, or are we just going to exclude that portion of it?
That's up to all of you.
I think we should exclude related to the agenda.
Yep, I agree with that too.
So we could delete the only to the announced topic and leave it at citizens will be allowed to speak during the present to speak portion of the board agenda.
Yeah, maybe that was,
Yep.
And how is that going to be recorded in the minutes, the present to speak part? Would
I
it
think you
be
do
again, the
this-
person's name, address, and like general topic?
I think legally you're not even required to have someone's address, and I don't like to put someone's address in minutes, to
Yeah.
be honest with you.
That's fine.
Okay, so we should delete that as a practice, do you think, or
I can
check
ask
out with
about
the
that,
rest
but
of the board?
If a
In my-
person reads, like uses their present to speak time to read the email they sent us, then they're getting mentioned under communications for emailing the thing. But now if they read it into present to speak, what happens? Now are we
another recap.
reading their whole letter? It has to
Nope.
be the same way, right?
Well, if they read it during present to speak, then the entire document is going into the video portion.
That's true. Yeah.
Where did I read that?
well, you probably wouldn't have to. Well, that's just a courtesy of putting that on the agenda. That doesn't have to be in the minutes, does it?
What was read aloud? You mean?
No, the minutes only has what we do and our actions and so forth.
Right.
I think you do it the same way you do the,
Communication, right?
yeah, Phil
'Cause
Stevens supporting the budget,
Right.
or supporting small class size, or whatever it is.
Yeah. Okay.
So a person could have that written twice. If we get an email that's going to be under communications, then if the person decides to speak on the topic, they're also going to be listed as present to speak, same topic.
Correct. The only, and I'll say bonus, I don't know if that's the correct word. The only bonus is that when they send the communication, it's FOIable. If they are speaking as part of a present to speak, there's nothing that's FOIable other than our video. But which is public anyways. Does that make sense?
Yes. When you get emails from citizens, you forward them to the whole board, or are there some that are just yours? I mean, I guess it kind of depends on the topic, right?
Yeah, it also depends on how they address it. Sometimes they'll say, "Dear Board of Education Superintendent." Sometimes it's, "Hey, dear Superintendent Stevens, can you tell me about this?" I don't send that to the full board because that's not, it's like
Yeah.
an individual communication. Or if someone says something to the board chair, that's board business. If it's sent to the full board, or depending on how they address it, it goes out. Either way, they're all FOIable.
Is there always a response so that the
There is
person?
now, yes.
Okay,
Yeah, we're starting to say, thank you for the, the notification. We've received your thing. It depends on what it is.
and it has been forwarded to all board members or
Correct.
whatever. I think that's important, that they know it was received. If we can't act on it, or we can't speak or respond when someone is doing present to speak, which is really difficult for me sometimes, especially when our townspeople are so impassioned. At least I would love them to know that they've been heard. So that's good that they are told that in the email section.
Yeah.
And really, so just doing the present to speak is more, well, a different form of communication, but also that allows them to get their ideas out to the public that way, which sometimes is the whole point.
Correct.
And I
Well,
respect that
Fair
too.
to all.
If they comment on present to speak, that doesn't, well, it goes into our minutes to a certain extent. But if it's a written document that they send, that would go into our archives, wouldn't it?
Correct.
The only way.
As long as they send it as a communication.
Yeah. And the
Yep.
recording, how long do we keep our recordings?
We're keeping them on YouTube. Some places are, and I can't remember who it was. We haven't deleted any. Some places, you're only right now required to keep your recordings for so long, whereas your minutes, you have to keep forever.
Mhm.
But I think the recording is really helpful. You can go back and watch, you can see what happened, who said what. And so that's why once we hear the updated legislation, I think it'll be important that that's going to be a piece of what we're doing now, right? Now, how does the recording get maintained? How does the present to speak apply to a recording? Things like that. Okay.
Mhm.
So let me take a swing at this then, based upon what I'm hearing you say. And then this is nowhere near board ready.
Mhm.
I want to make sure, and Herb mentioned Robert's rules. There are some things in here that are bylaws that are connected to Robert's rules. I want to make sure, because we say we follow Robert's rules. If it's different, then I want to make sure that's clear to you. And that will help. I'll try and lay out some of the things that we talked about how we receive communications, how they get notified, what goes on the agenda or in minutes, and how much or how little. That will be in the minutes section. That any graphs, things like that would be a part of a communication that could be in my office. Anything else that you want me to address as I kind of do a rewrite?
I think it should be clear what falls under FOI and what does not, because that might matter to someone one way or the other.
Mhm.
Well, I think if, FOI has probably a list of what goes into the minutes, members of the board, text of all motions, who attended, how they voted,
Mhm.
general
Yep.
description of all of the items on the agenda.
I can definitely do that. So
Yeah.
let me update those. And what I'll do is I'll, again, put everything in red. Obviously, the policy you have now is not edited. So let me do some edits. I'll put everything in red. At least it'll give you some starting space for how to review it again. But I have the sense of where you're headed, I think. Does that work for you?
Sounds good.
And I can reference some other policies too. The last thing on your agenda, and I just wanted to give you a heads up, I'm not sure where that A came from. Goodness gracious. For future meeting agenda items, I wanted to let you know that we already have an administering medication policy, but there's a lot of talk around the state, and I'm going to advocate that you create an administering medication policy that's an addition for Narcan, naloxone, Naroxen, whatever it's called there, because you're seeing more and more of this where there's, unattended overdose, middle school, elementary school, and we really should have a policy in place. I've had some folks reach out to us from the local substance abuse council, setting up training, and so they will train our folks, and I think there's, we can have it on site. Obviously, this would be done by our school nurses. That's the purpose of it. But I think we should have a policy stating how that works. So I have already pulled some sample policies from CAVE and other districts. That'll be kind of a next go around for you. I would like to do that. We can come back to the minutes and the bylaw, the minutes recording and the public participation. And then the other item on there was the use of private vehicles by district employees on school business. That's on there because there's some changes just pertaining to our insurance policy and some things that they wanted on there of what was required. And again, that's not a policy that's used very often at all. But if it is going to be used, what an employee would need to provide for documentation for our insurance provider to support that, if that makes sense.
We already do have a policy, don't we? 5141.
Yeah, you have it. But
This would be an update.
yeah, when I talked to Kerma, they were questioning what level of documentation we wanted from an employee, because we take their insurance, and the coverage they need is typically a little bit more than your average coverage. So for them to be eligible, for them to be able to drive under what Kerma wants to see, we need to change. We need to make some updates. So again, the updates are not necessarily as legal as they are your insurance policy. Your insurance folks want to see this in your policy, which I understand. So those are the two things that are coming up, and I'll add the pieces that we talked about tonight for minutes and vote recording and public participation. If the legislation does anything as far as recording and online meetings and stuff, I will try and add that in as well. Do you all, I'm going to need some time to do this, to pull some things together. And I'm just looking at vacation week next week. I'm not going to be ready for the 25th. So that would be maybe the first week of May. Is this Monday night thing a good thing for you for maybe May 2nd? Oh, we're holding that for
We have
special-
negotiations that day.
Right.
That's on the 2nd.
How about the 9th, May 9th? Is that too long?
May 9th. May 9th.
I have something that goes to 6:30, but it's kind of wishy-washy at 6:30.
Is it easier for me to just have Brenda look at my calendar, send out some dates to you? Do you want to just do that? We've done a bunch of Mondays in a row, but
May 9th is okay with me.
Brianna?
And also the 16th.
Well, and you're saying you couldn't do that?
No, not responsibly.
So let
The
me do this then.
16th, if that's not too late.
What's that?
The 16th, if that's not waiting too long.
What's up to you?
Herb, you said 16. Brianna, how's 16 for you? I think she went to get her calendar.
Yeah.
Phil, what is the proposal about the virtual at the State Department?
I haven't seen what they've done, but statutorily, you can't have people participate in an online meeting. They can only watch, right? That's the way the current legislation is written. So I'm assuming they're going to allow that. The struggles I know they're dealing with is town meeting, how to deal with those things. So I'm not sure where it's landed. May 16th, Brianna, that's what they were looking at. Does that work for you?
Yep. Well, is that when Ann's responsible?
Yeah,
It is.
I'm going to Maui the next morning, but I'll meet.
What?
We have a wedding, a family wedding, believe it or
Nice.
not. Yeah.
Do you
but
want
I-
to do
the
7
16th
p.m.?
works.
7
Pardon?
p.m.
Okay.
Is that what everybody wants? 7 p.m. Or do you want earlier, or what do you want? What do you want?
Brianna, is that best for you with Lauren's
Yes,
schedule? Okay,
It is.
okay.
7 p.m. next meeting. Thank you. You give me some time to get some work done with that
Yeah.
stuff. Okay.
Okay, thank
All
you.
right. Unless there's anything else, that is the last thing we have. And we can adjourn. It is 8:24. Just gonna click stop recording.